All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. One of the things about doing this show, as often as I do, is I definitely get repeat guests sometimes, and it's always nice to kind of catch up with people who've been on the show before. But the last time the guest on this episode was on the show, it was about something totally different. We were talking about your record label, and on this episode, we're talking about your band, which was talked about a little bit last time, and also like 5 or 6 years ago. But I think the best way to kick this off is if you want to introduce yourself and maybe just give a bit of background on the band, because, like I said, it's been around for a while, and I know a lot of things have kind of changed since the last time we formally sat down and talked about Suburban Hypocrites.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Nick, also known as D Scramble. I play in the band Suburban Hypocrites. We're a punk band from Winnipeg. We formed in, I want to say 2014. It might have been late 2013. Anyways, somewhere around there. Started as a three-piece. By the time we were playing shows, we were a four-piece. Now, as of last year, we're back down to a three-piece. So the lineup right now consists of myself on bass and vocals. Our previous bass player, Lucas, has moved over to guitar, so he's handling guitar and vocals now. And our drummer, Travis, is still behind the kit.
Cool. And so you have a new record that you're working on right now, which, I mean, I know there's a lot of history about the band we could talk about, and I'm sure we'll get to some of that. But you're about to release something. You've been busy, obviously, during the pandemic, because you guys put out a tape a few months ago, and now you have this full length that's coming out. So what's I guess maybe how has this been? How has this past 18 months been for you guys? And considering you can't play shows, you probably haven't been able to rehearse anywhere near as much as you wanted to, and yet you're still recording all this music and then putting it out.
Yeah, it's been weird because it's kind of been like 0 to 60 the last little while. It went from absolutely nothing to absolutely everything in a short amount of time. As far as the last 18 months, my personal life, probably the worst 18 months of my life. I'm hopefully on the tail end of it right now.
Oh, that's good.
But if there's any silver lining, it gave me the ammo to write a lot of the album that we're putting out soon. So there was some good in it. But yeah, we did put out a tape a couple months ago, which was called "No Plan, No Budget, No Problem."
The lovely
we conveniently
Pallister cover,
used a picture of Pallister on the front of it, but that was kind of almost an afterthought because "No Plan, No Budget, No Problem" was kind of his way of dealing with the pandemic, but it was also our motto on how that whole thing came to be.
Right.
Because we were approached by one of Lucas's friends who was in Mid-Ocean. It's like a audio recording school.
Yeah.
He was doing his final project there and he needed a band to record. So it was kind of super short notice, like, hey, do you guys want to come in, lay down some tracks? And we were kind of in the stage of tracking the album already. So we were like, well, doesn't really make sense to do like album songs twice once we've already demoed them and are now, past pre-production. Yeah. So we kind of said, all right, well, we'll do 2 songs that were supposed to be on the album, and we kind of just did alternate takes, like they were played at different tempos and some things changed in the final versions.
Okay.
And then we just did 2 covers on that one.
Cool.
Yeah, so the other 2 tracks were just covers, and then we just threw it on a cassette because we needed something to do with it.
Well, and you have a tape label, which helps, right? I mean, that makes it a little more convenient than
Yeah, it's basically just my outlet for putting out stuff that other labels don't want.
Yeah.
From my bands. I'm like, well, if you're not going to put it out, I'll do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess like your role obviously has changed in that you're playing bass and singing now rather than just being the front man, right? So how has that been transitioning from that? Because based on this new record anyway, that you guys are more technical now as a 3-piece than you were as a 4-piece. Like the songs sound more complex, there's more going on, and I don't know if that's just a factor of changing the lineup around or what, but it seems like the early stuff was a lot more kind of just that sort of stereotypical drunk punk kind of like, yelling into a mic with 3-chord shit, and now this is more kind of almost like some of it fits into the melodic hardcore sort of side of things, and parts are heavier, and there's more changes and breakdowns and things like that. So how did that happen?
Well, we tuned down a full step, which was a big thing to adding to kind of the heavy of the sound. Yeah. And me and Lucas had wanted to do that for a long time, but it kind of fell on deaf ears every time we suggested it in previous iterations, because it was like, well, now these songs aren't going to sound right because we started writing in standard and nobody wanted to tune kind of thing between songs like in a live set. So we dropped everything down, and then I also play bass in Hume, so I'm familiar with playing bass, but this is actually the first project where I've actually had to sing and play bass at the same time. So that was definitely a challenge to me. And when Taras departed from the band in early 2020, the original plan was for me to play guitar.
Okay.
And I'm not a great guitar player. I'm not a great bass player either, but I'm definitely, more fluent at playing bass. So I was pretty hesitant to play guitar. And we had a couple jams, worked on a couple new songs, and I really wasn't a fan of how they were coming out. I was pretty reluctant at that point and discouraged to keep the band going. And at that point, Lucas had said, like, what if I switch over to guitar? Because he's like a great guitar player. So
yeah.
I was like, yeah, we'll give that a whirl, and we did, and it worked out great.
Cool. Is it a conscious shift to making things heavier? I mean, I know you said you tuned down. Obviously, that's going to have an impact on the whole sound. But I mean, are you guys just maybe listening to different stuff now? I imagine playing in Inhumed, you're getting, if you weren't already, exposed to a lot more kind of brutal, heavy music than you would have been, just in a punk band, right?
Well, I've, believe it or not, always been a metal guy. I'd probably say I was a metal guy before I was a punk guy.
Okay.
And then it kind of came full circle. So I've always been into metal, but definitely now that I have more of a hand in the instrumentation of things, I would say that for sure plays a factor in that, because I did do a good amount of songwriting on our very first album, and a lot of the heavier songs on that were my contributions to that album. So there's that, coupled with like during the pandemic, I know Lucas was listening to a lot of Napalm Death at one point, so I know that probably got worked into things. I mean, I listened to a lot of that too. But as far as like influences and sounds go, me for myself used to be pretty close-minded in what I would listen to, but being isolated for so long, I kind of learned to expand my horizons. So during the period of like the writing of the album, I was listening to everything from like Devo to Thin Lizzy, Steely Dan, and then I throw on a Cannibal Corpse record after for good measure. So
and that's reflected on the tape too. You have a Devo cover on the tape, right? I mean, that's so obviously that stuff is seeping in as well.
Yeah, I kind of got the other guys in the band turned on to Devo, and that was right when that opportunity was coming around, and we were picking covers. And Lucas had picked the Hollywood Squares cover, which he's very into like obscure punk rock stuff from the 80s. So that's kind of what he always wants to cover, which is cool because we make it our own. But then they were like, why don't you pick a Devo song if you like Devo so much? So I originally wanted to do Gates of Steel, and then they countered me with, they're like, well, what about Blockhead? Because it's a really weird song, but it's still pretty catchy.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. And I'm actually amazed at how tight that cover came out sounding, because we never jammed it as a band before going into the studio. We changed the tempo and everything too. So it was just kind of like, okay, everyone learn how to play it on your own time. We're going to meet up like in a week in the studio and just hope for the best. And it came out okay. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I wanted to ask you, because you guys have been doing this as long as you have, I think when I met you, you were all super young, because this was like 6 years ago or something too, and you were just getting started as a band and everything. What is your sort of take? I know there's no shows right now, or they are now sort of happening again, but what's your take on where Winnipeg's punk scene is now compared to what it was when you guys were just sort of young and starting out and trying to find opportunities?
It's definitely had some doors open and some doors closed for sure. We've lost venues, we've gained venues. Right now, one thing I do really think is cool is the Bulldog Event Center over on Main. They're kind of spearheading the whole all ages show thing again. They're a huge venue, like they can hold, I think, 350 people. But it's totally all ages, and they have a licensed bar, so they've got that. And the park just reopened, so that's great too. Like, I don't know if you went to any of the propaganda shows.
I did, I went to the Saturday show. It was great.
Right on. Yeah, so what they've done with that room's awesome too, but for a lot of bands starting out, that's way too big of a room, whereas
for sure
the event center, they can take on the smaller bookings. So that's awesome. And we didn't really have anything like that when we were starting. We had the zoo, but that's 18 plus, and we had Cavern. We didn't really have any all ages options. So it's cool to see those popping up, and I hope that continues for sure.
Which is weird, because that's the audience. For a lot of bands playing, and especially in the style you were more doing back then, the teenage crowd is the crowd for that. You're playing like anything from pop punk to skate punk to even just like sort of your basic straight out hardcore. Teenagers are like the lifeblood of that stuff, right? And so it's weird to think that there wasn't anywhere for young kids to see that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we like all three of us grew up in rural communities outside of Winnipeg, so
Right,
we
right.
never saw shows. So even like when we started playing shows, that was like some of our first exposure to smaller shows. Because before it was you just go to the big shows of the other headlining touring acts, like the big
Yeah,
deals. So I never really got to experience the Albert in its heyday or anything, which sucks.
yeah.
But it is what it is.
Well, now it's back. It seems a bit different, but I mean, maybe you guys can turn it into a punk venue again. It could happen.
Yeah, we got to play once before the pandemic. I think it was, I want to say like December 2019. It was kind of right when they were, I think it was the first show when they like reopened it
Yeah,
because it had closed and then opened. And yeah, so we played the one time there. The bar wasn't totally set up, but it was really fun. It was a really good room.
yeah. Well, it has a history, right? I mean, that's that. If you're a punk band, that's kind of where you want to play in Winnipeg. Even if it's not the same as it was back then, it's the Albert. It has the mystique, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's I mean, I'm sick of dwelling on the pandemic because I talk to everyone about it. And I've been talking to everyone about it twice a week for like a year and a half or more. But what's sort of in the cards for you guys going forward? No, you obviously have a record you're going to put out, which is a big deal, and I think you may have timed it right where it's going to come out when things are hopefully getting better, and things like release shows can happen, and you can actually sell CDs to people hand to hand and all that. But what's sort of the near future plans for the band? What are you hoping to do now that we're coming out of this?
Well, I'm at least now that we've gotten our first show out of the way, which was like back in August, I'm
Yeah,
starting to at least feel confident with this lineup, because that was the other thing, was like playing live. It's kind of the big shock of like, is this going to translate well? Because
yeah,
what sounds good in the jam space, which is basically just a wall of sound, doesn't always sound great live. So I was pretty nervous about that, but I'm feeling pretty confident after the first show. So after this release show, I would like to do some out of town shows by the end of the year, but we're kind of just keeping it up in the air. It's going to be like kind of booking on a month's notice type thing.
yeah,
But one thing we did kind of discuss getting when the band kind of reformed is we had gotten to the point where we were almost damaging ourselves from playing so often. Like we kind of ended up just being that band that was like playing every weekend, sometimes twice a weekend, mostly locally.
yeah.
So we're just kind of at and like we're all in different bands now too. So it's kind of like, all right, let's do this again, but not make that same mistake of like totally burning ourselves out and like totally making everyone get sick of us. So yeah, I'm hoping after this release show, as far as local stuff, just take it easy till the new year.
Yeah.
And hopefully some out of town shows.
Yeah, yeah, that would be cool. Well, yeah, and I guess you don't want to come back from the pandemic too and suddenly become that band again, also, right? It's like, oh, cool, these guys are back. I want to check them out, and then it's like, oh wait, they're playing every second day for the next 6 months, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we like this is gonna air, I think, after both shows, but we have
Probably, yeah.
like 2 shows within 2 weeks right now, and then I'm like, okay, that's it. That's the last 2 shows for the year, unless something like that we can't pass up pops up. No,
Yeah,
like don't do it again.
for sure. Is it does your songwriting change with this current line of the band? I mean, I'm not sure what your role was exactly as far as writing the music part of things. I'm assuming you wrote the lyrics, but before this, but now that you're playing bass as well, does that sort of shift just kind of like the basic structure of the songs because you're bringing that aspect to it as well, or is it still similar to how it was written before?
It's pretty similar. Like this album, for the most part, is like Lucas and Travis's writing instrumentally. I mean,
Okay.
I brought in some ideas here and there, but mainly how the album ended up being written was they live together. Like they share a house, but they have a studio in the house, which is
Nice.
where we record. So they were able to demo ideas or at least like skeleton songs, and they'd send them over to me, and then I'd sit there with my bass and be like, okay, well, this is cool, or like, can we switch this section around with this one? And then when we could get together, we would all meet up, jam it live off the floor, and then I would leave with those recordings, write my lyrics to it, and then come back, and we just kind of put it together piece by piece.
Okay. I think that based on like the songs, I mean, I've heard a bunch of your stuff over the years and various records and tapes and things, and I don't think that I think I would say that most of the songs, not most, but a lot of the songs have kind of an, I don't want to say a novelty factor to them, but they're funny. Like there's funny song titles. There's like a sense of humor to it. There's obviously kind of the drunken vibe to a lot of the songs, even with the title of this new one, right? And I mean, like but then you have the tape came out with Pallister, like we're talking about this picture of Pallister on there. It's obviously making a statement of some kind. I mean, not of some kind, it's obvious what the statement is, but you know what I mean, right? Like, so often when you have shitty situations politically, and I mean, it's pretty fair to say, I think the pandemic is a shitty situation for everyone, not to mention the way that Manitoba, particularly was dealt with and things like that. Genres like punk rock and like hip hop and things like that tend to kind of have a boost in terms of like just, it's not morale, because the morale for everyone is super low, but there's something to be angry against, something to rebel against, something to be pissed off at. Did you guys find that with this situation we're in, that you're just like more to be kind of, you want to yell about things more because you have that kind of inspiration from the shitty situation?
Yeah and no, like we've never really considered ourselves as a political band.
No, and I wouldn't either, but you know, it's
I think a lot of it is more like personal angst from me.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the figment of your inebriation. Interestingly enough, like I quit drinking. I'm 2 years, or just like 2.5 years sober almost
right
now. And a lot of the subject matter on the album deals with, you know, like the throes of addiction and getting out of it, and just your mental state after, you know, being messed up for so long.
Yeah.
So it was definitely more of a personal album for me to write. And actually, a fun fact, I don't know if you've seen the album cover. I actually have it sitting right here.
Yeah, it looks very black, right? It looks like just a black.
Yeah, it looks like a almost just like a stock Photoshop gradient. It's actually a photograph of the ceiling above my bed.
Okay.
And it's symbolism, because I spent a good chunk of a year just kind of laying there existing, not really wanting to, and that's where I wrote pretty much all the songs on the record.
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely, I feel like our previous material, I would, you know, touch down on subjects like my mental health, etc., but it was more so of a like, this sucks, but hey, we can laugh at it kind of
totally
thing. And trying to just like be humorous towards it. But this stuff definitely, it's not a feel good record by any means. It's more so a cathartic record, and I feel like everybody's had, you know, a shitty past couple of years, so I feel like there's something on there for everyone to relate to. And not in a good way, but yeah. It's unfortunate. We've all had a shitty 2 years, so
for sure. Yeah,
hopefully this album will make you feel like you're not alone in that.
Yeah, well, I know you've only played a couple shows since things have opened up, but is it cathartic to play these? Like, is it cathartic to get out on stage and actually just kind of get that out in front of people versus getting it out, you know, in a studio or on a record?
Yeah, definitely. It's always cool to see people's reactions when you're playing new stuff. And I know like people who have been following us for quite a few years were probably eager to see us live too, because it's like the new lineup. It's totally a shift in sound, but on top of it, it's like we're missing a member. So it's like, okay, well, what's it going to sound like now? Is it going to totally, you know, fall flat on its face, or is it going to hold up? So it's been fun hearing people's reactions to all the new stuff.
Has it been pretty positive for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, generally people aren't going to tell you if it sucks.
That's true.
I wish they did. I wish more people told me when things sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to do that myself as much as possible with people I care about, and be honest, it gets me in trouble a lot. But yeah, no, it's from what I've heard, it's been positive. So cool. Hopefully it is sincerely positive.
Cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, for sure. You especially when you've put all this time in and you haven't had a chance to play in front of people, you certainly hope that they're gonna respond well to it, because I think at this point we're still in the kind of everyone wants to go to whatever show just because it's a show era. Yeah, and I think that the selection of people choosing certain bands over others, I think, will happen a little bit later. Right now, it's just there's a show, I'm there because I have been deprived for 2 years, and yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how people respond to it. You know, once the record's out and once they've kind of been able to live with the songs and listen to them a bunch of times and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it was weird too, because we're normally a band who like it's go go go. Like we spent, you know, probably 6 or 7 years just like, it was like write something, record it, get it out there, go tour it. And so then like having this downtime, like it was easily the longest. Like I think the time we recorded the last 2 full lengths combined was still shorter than the time it took us to record this one. And I think that was like multiple factors. Like it was, procrastination, but also just everything going in and out of lockdown. It was like we tried to do everything as responsibly as possible and, do everything by the book. So it was like if I wasn't allowed over there to record, then I wasn't allowed to over there to record until the public health orders changed.
Well, I'm glad to hear you guys followed them. It's always good to hear people are actually paying attention to the safety rules and stuff. Yeah. So presumably this will be out by the time people hear this podcast. What's the best way to check it out? I mean, I see you have a CD there. I'm assuming physical copies are available, especially since you have a label. What's the deal there?
Yeah. So there's going to be CD copies available through my label, Frozen Hell Records, which you can just find on Bandcamp or on Facebook, and there's the link to the web store right there.
Yeah.
Those will probably be up the week before the album actually comes out, so I can start shipping them out so people get them like when they're supposed to. And then it's also going to be up digitally on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, basically anywhere you can stream music. It'll be up there October 29th.
Cool. And then the other stuff, I mean, a lot of the old stuff is probably still available. Again, I would assume through the Bandcamp and then also just on the streaming services.
Yeah, everything's up on Bandcamp, I think, for pay what you want or whatever right now. So you can just hit 0 and download it for free. It's also on all the streaming sites. We are, however, going to be taking it off the streaming sites soon, but it will return. It's just we're taking it down to tweak some things and put it back up. And we just switched over like the companies that handle everything for our streaming stuff. So yeah. So if you're listening to this and you go look and it's not there, it'll be back up soon.
Right. Cool. Okay. And then what else is going on with the label? I mean, I know that's what we talked about last year when you were on the show, but is there anything else? Obviously, again, things are just we're just seeing daylight after this horrible period of everyone being locked down. But I mean, do you have any plans for things that are going to be released in the future?
Yeah, I want to pick it up again soon. I mean, it was kind of a soft start just because of everything going on, and it was mainly something I was planning to do, with the bands that I'm in, like, setting up at shows and being able to sell my stuff there. So with no shows, couldn't do that. Did a bit of online stuff, but it's also hard, to sign bands or put releases out by bands when nobody's recording now. So I probably picked like the world's worst possible time to start it. But yeah, it's still just kind of, hibernating right now. I'm doing things with it slowly, but I'm hoping once things start to open up, I can pick it up again.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, for your first year of it or whatever it was, you did put out quite a bit of stuff. I mean, you had a bunch of tapes and you have the 7-inch for Inhumed and stuff.
Yeah. I think I did 4 tapes and a 7-inch in the first.
Pretty good. It's pretty good for first
7 months or whatever, because it was like mid last year. Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, and then I guess the pandemic hit like kind of midway through that that first year of existing.
I started it during the pandemic, actually.
Oh shit, okay, that's even worse.
I think it was like summer of last year, so a couple months into it. So yeah, it was not the best decision on my part, but I knew that getting into it, so it was nice. It helped keep my sanity for a little bit during the tough times there. So I'm thankful. I bet, yeah.
What's the best way to, I mean, I know, like we've just discussed where people can find the music, but the good thing about this being a podcast is someone could hear it, the day it comes out, they could hear it a year later. And hopefully by then, things have cleared up a lot and you're playing shows, you're touring, the record's out, all that stuff. What's the best way to follow you guys to find out what you're doing as far as potential upcoming shows and things like that?
We're generally the most active on Instagram. We're also on Facebook. Instagram is just Subhyps, one word, SUBHYPS. And then obviously if you just type in Suburban Hypocrites on Facebook, you'll find us. I don't think there's any other bands called Suburban Hypocrites.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That's the one thing about having a really long, confusing name that works in our advantage is when you do manage to spell it right and type us in, we're like the first one that pops up. And
then you have the short Subhyps version if you want to be brief about it, right?
Yeah, I can't remember the first person who did that, but it wasn't me, and I saw it and I was like, hey, that's the thing from now on, because I misspell our own band name way too often.
As long as you get it right on the album, you're good.
Yeah, I'm so paranoid with that too. I think I probably spent a total of 20 hours looking over like the one lyric sheet on the new album for spelling mistakes, because there's, I think, 2 on our first album that we did a lyric sheet for, and no one's ever said anything to me about them, but I'm still mad about it to this day.
I'm gonna go back and look at it as soon as we're done the call here.
I think the second album I opted out from doing a lyric sheet just because I didn't want to go through that stress again. I think I just put some stupid logo or something there instead.
Right on.